I cannot believe I'm 90 years old. I don't feel it. I don't think I look it. I have the same energy I was born with. I wake up every morning. I walk into my living room. I look out the window and I say, life is beautiful.
Come on, come through New York, New York.
So words to describe Ruth. What first comes to my mind is poised. Not only in terms of the steadiness of her character and her mindfulness, but literally, physically, posturally, she is one amazing woman.
Ruth is a force of nature. She is enthusiastic, full of vivacity and vim. She is probably the most socially engaged person I know. She's ageless. She's an amazing person. You will not meet many people like Ruth Linford.
So what are the qualities that make a best friend? I guess sharing laughter, being able to be real, talk about real problems and get good guidance. Definitely sharing the same passions. She's a great confidant. She always has been the first person that I call to share news with. And that's what's so amazing, is that even though we're in different generations, we're very much kindred spirits. Ruth is my best friend, and she's also my grandmother.
I think I must have been born imaginative, visual. Everything I see, I can imagine differently. My mind is like a kaleidoscope. It is constantly moving and moving. I see everything as it is and as it might be.
Ruth has told me stories about growing up in St. Louis and how she was kind of her father's right arm.
My father gave me two gifts. The first and most important, a strong self-image. And second, his joy of living. My father was never bored a day in his life. When I was 3½, I was very petite and had a very low voice. So my father decided to enroll me in elocution school, which I loved. About the same time, my sister Gloria was born, so my grandmother, Con, took me for my weekly lessons. We were in a room where I performed, long, narrow room. She was at one end, I was at the other. And she would say, "Louder, Ruthie, louder." And I enjoyed it, so I did whatever she asked. Shortly after that, I wore different costumes for different events where I performed. One was a Sis Hopkins costume, a hat with tall feathers. Another costume was a ballet costume. I really enjoyed performing.
I wish I had met or remembered my grandmother's father. His name was Adolf Kahn. I think he shaped Ruth to be who she is because he believed in her, and that's why she believes in herself. He never treated her as I think sometimes daughters were treated. And he made sure she got an education. And he made sure to tell her she could pursue whatever field she wanted to pursue.
I was ready to enter college at the age of 16, and he told me I had two choices, either his alma mater, which was St. Louis University, or this college, Washington University. Well, after visiting both schools, there was no question in my mind that I wanted Wash U. After 2 years of liberal arts, I had to decide on what profession. Well, since I excelled in mathematics, a cousin of my father's, a woman, suggested, why doesn't Ruth enroll in architecture? And WashU has a wonderful school of architecture. So I enrolled at Gibbons Hall, and I just took to it like a duck does to water. In my class, there were about 5 women and about 75 men. After 67 years since I graduated, I still have close association with my alma mater. I come twice a year to the Sam Fox National Council meeting. I'm part of the Elliott Society. And also, of course, I'm very proud of the fact that 3 years ago, I received the Distinguished Alumni Award. One person from each of 6 of the schools. I was one of the 6. 5 men, 1 woman. I was the woman representing architecture. My father said, I hope you get married, have lots of children, but you never know in life when you can lose all your possessions. But what is here, you never lose. I realized design was my life when we moved west, the house on Cornell, which needed a quite bit of refurbishing. I went with my mother down to Lambert, the top department store for furniture, selected a new sofa, a Duncan Phyfe, selected the fabric, a beautiful coral color damask, another chair. And then when I became engaged, we needed new draperies, reupholstery of a chair. I selected everything. It was then that I truly understood my need to pursue anything in design. I met my future husband, Franklin J. Linford, but we always called him FJ, in St. Louis. He wasn't particularly handsome, but he was quite charming, very intelligent, and of course he catered on me. I found him very outgoing, the life of the party, always telling jokes, and everything about him impressed me. During my senior year, I was invited during my Christmas holidays to New York, where I had never been before. While I was there, I became engaged. I called my father from New York. He said, my dear, we'll talk about the matter when you get home. Well, his only complaint was, you could get married, but you must get your degree first. So went from a bachelor on Thursday to a Mrs. on Saturday.
I knew my grandmother worked in interior design, but I didn't really understand the legislative capacity. I think I understood her significance or her contribution to her field when I was probably in middle school, and she invited me to an award ceremony. And it was a huge celebration, and she got the last award, and there was a standing ovation, and there were hundreds of people in the room. And I felt, I guess, a vicarious sense of pride. That's when I knew she had made a contribution to her field.
I arrived in New York after a 2-week honeymoon in Bermuda. course, looking for a job. And I applied to a very prestigious architectural firm, York and Sawyer. They hired me, and I was to do drafting, which was the normal thing fresh out of school. I always called it pushing a pencil. And I worked there for 3 years, and they said I was doing an excellent job. And when I asked one of the principals what was my future opportunity, they said, Ruth, as a woman, we do not allow you either in the design studio or out in the field. Well, I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life pushing a pencil, so I left York and Sawyer, and I was on my own.
And that, I think, prompted her to go into interior design, to start to pioneer a field.
My greatest joy in my life, of course, is having the 4 children. Our firstborn was Jeffrey. Then there was a time that went by. I was working on my profession. My mother came from St. Louis, said, Ruth, you have to have more children. 1 is not enough. I said, Mother, I'm working with my firm. I will have more very shortly. Well, less than 5 years later, I had Lance, my second son. Shortly thereafter, 2 years later, came Leslie, my daughter. And then 1.5 years later came Lloyd, my youngest. My mother had a trip back to New York. She said, Ruth, I didn't mean to oversell the idea.
My brothers and sister and I borrowed, I don't know whose line it was, that your mother dresses you funny.
I couldn't take all 4 children, each in a different pattern. There was a wonderful children's shop in Ridgewood, New Jersey. I would walk in, select the same outfit for all 4, even if it was a girl, which of course was Leslie.
We would all have the same jackets, whether they're blazers or seersucker. We would all have the same pajamas, Dr. Denton with feet. She really liked to get us color coordinated, as she would say.
And they became coined the Penguins. And to this day, every Father's Day, they all get the same sweater, they all get the same tie. She just likes uniformity.
I'm a fortunate grandmother in having 8 grandchildren, 4 boys, 4 girls. The eldest is Victoria, who we call Tori. She has a younger brother, Drew, who now lives in Philadelphia.
I don't know if you know that my unofficial nickname in the family is the Lion Tamer.
No, I never heard it until today.
So it seems that I'm called the Lion Tamer because, oh, and you're the lion,
Of course.
because I'm able to talk you down in a moment where you decide you make up your mind and that's that. There are very few people who can deter you from what you want to have happen.
The next in order of age is Alex. He is probably one of the most caring of all my grandchildren. Ben is Alex Liniford's younger brother. He has a very interesting job as a lighting designer on ships. And then I guess the next in line, my daughter has a lovely son, Hugh. And the next one in line is his sister, Rachel. She's my tallest of all granddaughters, and she has this beautiful red hair. The next one, I guess, would be Sophie. Sophie graduated about 3 years ago from Brown University, specializing in art history. And the last of my 8 grandchildren is Julia, and the field she's in is psychology. I came to New York as a newlywed, 21. I was a little hesitant, but once I got here, I'll never go back to St. Louis or anywhere else. New York is exciting, stimulating, culture everywhere. I'll live the rest of my life in New York. I'm fortunate enough to be in Manhattan now. It's my life.
It's hard to believe that she's ever lived anywhere else. She defines New York in my mind. I think it's her view. I think it's the opera. I think it's her amazing group of friends, diverse group of friends. I think she's adamant about taking the subway. I think she likes the freedom. I like to think she likes the pace because it's just who she is.
After World War II, there was a tremendous amount of construction, particularly in Manhattan, in New York. Therefore, there was tremendous opportunities for architects to really design shells, apartment, office buildings, but it was a perfect opportunity for interior designers to come in and finish, make them really look beautiful. They were really doing more decorating, but it was the beginning of the profession. In 1960, we found a wonderful house in West Nyack, New York. It was a 22-room house. It was the site of the last witch trial that took place in 1816. In addition, there's a sign up that says Washington's troops stayed there. I think it was in the 1700s. It was a wonderful place for my 4 children, my husband, and myself to live in.
If we misbehaved, typically it was my younger brother and myself ganging up on our sister Leslie, and she would say, they started it, and we would say, oh, she started it, and my mother would say, I don't care who started it, all go to your room. Reflecting back over the decades, my mother has always brought a certain energy and excitement and vitality to whatever she's set herself to do. She doesn't take no for an answer. And she has been a trailblazer since in the post-war era, whatever she has set her mind to do.
Growing up with her, we remember her being energetic, focused, wanting the best for her children, always expected A for effort and would rather have that than A for achievement. She's been described over the years as a going concern, and she's still going.
There's something about Ruth's presence. She's sort of a grande dame, and because she's kind of the mother of her industry, she's very well known.
My image of my grandmother hasn't changed. In fact, it's always steadfast. She's so much herself. We all change, but she doesn't age. She is always true to herself, and I think that I noticed that early on, and that's part of her power.
There's something about her fabulosity that emanates, and people, you walk down the street with my grandmother, people just stare.
Well, I've known Ruth for, the almost 10 years that I've been on the board, and I think from the first moment it became clear that as much as anyone I have ever met, she exemplifies someone who truly embodies the idea of joie de vivre. I think that there is not a moment of any day in her life that she wasn't truly living it.
My first impression was amazement. When I met her and I knew how old she was, I was like, this is unreal. This is not usual. She's not like anybody you ever met. You got people who are half her age who can't keep up with her.
I guess I was born with energy, and it doesn't diminish with age. I want everybody to know, if you're born with it, you die with it.
If you're in design, and especially in interior design and architecture, and in New York, it is very hard not to know Ruth Linford. Design is around her. Having read her book and understood how design conscious she was even as a child, that she had an eye, she understood what worked. And that's a very unusual trait. And I think a lot of designers have it, but Ruth has an overabundance of it.
The best time of my life has been here in St. Louis, working on the book with you.
It was so much fun.
I did have a chance to read the book that was recently published about Ruth. Things that I really loved is the red. We call Ruth Red Lips Houlihan. Anybody who meets Ruth, one of the first things they notice is her red lipstick. I'm not surprised that she says designing sparked her imagination. She sees the world through a visual lens. She's a visual thinker through and through, and I am as well. My grandmother said that her favorite job ever was working for Pierre Cardin, and that she would go to Paris twice a year to present her ideas to him. I believe she worked for Cardin over a period of years in the 70s and was a ghost designer for him. I look at Ruth's furniture designs for Pierre Cardin, and they are timeless. They are very sophisticated, and I think that's the most important element to good design, is that it stands the test of time.
Ruth, I have a surprise for you.
A surprise?
Yes.
Whoa.
Come on over.
All right. Can't wait.
Ruth, I am so excited to show you this.
Yes. Oh, Marlene, where did you find this?
It's a mystery.
Oh, God.
Amazing.
It's amazing. I can't believe it.
I know.
Some people love history, some people ignore it. What's important isn't the designs. What's important to the story, Ruth's story, is the legislation, is the professionalization, which enables their careers to bring in the status and the money that they make. Otherwise, they wouldn't really be able to have as successful an industry.
Ruth has been a tireless champion of our industry, and of course has led the charge that got us the Title Act, and now onward to the Practice Act. Without Ruth, none of this would have happened.
And we formed the coalition because we wanted to go to Albany, New York State capital, to speak in one voice. It was quite a landmark accomplishment. We were the 10th state in the country to legalize the profession. To date, I think there are 25 states at least. So after a cost of $5 million over a period of 6 years, we finally are legally recognized. We're trying always to raise the bar. What we wanted this time was to allow licensed interior designers, who are called certified, to take their drawings directly to the building department to get a CEO, certificate of occupancy.
And that's what's really interesting, is that Ruth's core people are from completely different age groups. Sashi, like Ruth, has devoted her life to design. She is poised, elegant, and driven. just like Ruth.
I saw Ruth at many events but didn't know her, and always admired her from a distance, and admired her knowledge and her clarity with where she was thinking of taking the interiors profession for its legitimacy.
So what we do in Albany is we try to educate them by bringing students work. You know, we have an exhibition once a year in the spring in Albany, where now there are 12 recognized prestigious institutions who exhibit student work to educate the legislators what interior design is all about and how it affects people.
When they talk, it's like they're two young girls because they have such fun together. And they talk about serious things, about their trip to Albany, or they talk about love. They talk about it all.
As a friend in the last, I think in the last 5 or 6 years, I feel very fortunate to have made particularly close connections to Ruth, to the extent that today I think we can talk about anything.
Interior design is an industry now that's very established, but that wasn't the case 60 years ago. And like any industry, people forget what it was like for the forebears, for the people who, especially women, who afforded them the opportunities that they have today.
Do you know who Ruth Linford is?
I do not.
Do you know who Ruth Linford is?
No, I'm afraid I don't know. I only know a little bit about her actually from here at school when she came and spoke to our healthcare design class, and her work in the legislation for interior design, but not much about that.
When I got the opportunity to finally meet Ruth, and she was an utterly charming individual, but I understood that there was a passion and drive, or I could sense there was a passion and drive there as well.
Ruth is a force. She's a force in New York State and a force in interior design professional practice. Educators and researchers have been working to create a body of knowledge and differentiate it from architecture. Certification and licensure and recognition by legislative bodies puts it into the public domain. But there's also a great level of prestige. It becomes a profession and not a trade. And Ruth is key to that. New York State is a leading state, I like to think, as a born New Yorker, but also Ruth was the first voice, and probably for a long time the only voice, saying we need to recognize interior design as a profession.
For my future, the main thing that I look for is just being happy. I'm very open, you know, I don't want to do just residential design. Again, because I'm so hands-on, I'm open to doing furniture design or you know, different aspects of the interior design field.
Basically, I started decorating every wall in my house in France, painting everything that I could find. Murals was a big thing for me. And then I studied fine arts and I got into murals. And then I thought, I'm going to have so much of a little time painting when I can actually overlook projects. So when I worked under Peter Marino, I was an interior designer for Chanel boutiques. And then I was doing 10 boutiques at a time. I was covering wallpapers, fabrics, furniture. And so that liberated me from just being a pencil on the paper.
First of all, I wish to, am I on? Take me off.
Ruth started her practice with a woman named Sana Mayo. They had an office around the corner from here. And they were a very good team. They brought different things to the table in terms of personality types. Sana was very understated, soft-spoken, very elegant.
She is a lovely friend, a wonderful hostess, a very efficient and detail-oriented design person. I have enormous respect for her. And I learned a huge amount from Ruth, as I'm sure everyone of her friends can tell you, friends and associates can tell you that. My duties with Ruth were mostly shopping, some clerical work, learning from her what the clients wanted and what she saw for the clients, and then trying to bring those visions into reality. She was also very involved in legislation at the time, and as I enjoyed writing, and as she was very good at telling me what she was trying to express, we formed a sort of partnership in that regard as well. The thing that I actually, that I appreciate the most about Ruth is that she is an excellent teacher. I came to her really knowing very little about design. She was the most generous of instructors and brought me in and brought me along in a way that I think is extremely rare.
I love design. I think that's something Ruth and I have in common. We're both very passionate. I think Ruth showed me what was possible, and I think that's important in life, that I feel lucky enough that I had someone like that at that time in my life.
Really what I wanted to tell you was the most exciting thing that happened to me last year was when you allowed the organization, New York 11, now they call it 11 Plus, had a need for a showroom for the students of these 12 prestigious institutions in New York State. We needed a place to exhibit their work. And your former showroom was large enough to have exhibit of all 12 schools on one floor. I don't know if you remember.
Well, of course I remember. That was a terrific moment, and of course that's very much keeping with what our founder, Florence Knoll, believed in creating an educational environment for the continuing practice of interior design. And she would be very proud to know that New York 11, as well as similar organizations around the country, utilize our showrooms on an ongoing basis for educational purposes. Hans and Florence Knoll pioneered the idea that furniture and architecture had a symbiotic relationship for the workplace. Their historic collaborations with people like Mies and Saarinen and Bertoia created some of the most signature pieces of furniture that this country, even the world, has ever seen. Textiles as an independent discipline really never existed until Florence Knoll pioneered the idea of creating specialty textiles for the contract furniture industry. Her studies in pattern, in texture, and in scale set a standard that is still admired worldwide today.
Student work will be on either side. Each school, we now have 12 schools. It used to be 11.
Okay, that's great.
So we'll have them on either side. And then we'll have student work going down that wall.
Okay.
We'll have student work going that wall. And of course, this area is the perfect space for the ribbon cutting ceremony.
Great.
You'll stand here, I'll stand here.
Okay.
If you remember, Garrity, Mr. Garrity was where you were standing.
Exactly.
We had a ribbon here.
Across the rails?
Across the rails. And we tried to educate the public, legislators, the press, about the importance of interior design to people's living in their interior environment. It's a place of nurturing, it's a place of learning, it's a place of working. And we tried to get that across to the public.
Well, that's great. And we're, as Hayworth, we're happy to support that, your mission, because we care about these students and we care about their learning, and we really enjoy working with you and all that you do.
We're grateful. We're grateful to Hayworth. It's the perfect atmosphere to display, to discuss, and have people see it all. I have a question James, when did you introduce the Eames chair, the famous Eames chair?
In the 40s.
In
Ray
the
and Charles,
40s?
yeah.
Go ahead.
Ray and Charles Eames were good friends with George Nelson.
Mhm.
So George Nelson started collaborating with them to produce some of the most famous pieces that Herman Miller is known for. And so it was a really, such a rich period in design history, and that whole mid-century period was so important. And we were really lucky to be involved with some of the best designers of all time,
the world.
Really,
that's right.
Today their designs are just as popular, if not more than they've
Yeah.
ever been.
That Eames chair and other Eames furniture is timeless. And I think most of the furniture was jointly done by Ray, the wife, and his
And Charles.
And Charles.
Yeah, they were very collaborative team, and they worked together quite well. There's a great documentary on them that came out about 2 years ago called Eames, the Architect and the Painter. And it's a great look at their personal life as well as their professional life. It's really very interesting.
Ruth is, of course, a legend in our industry. She is not only a person of great taste and style, perseverance and tenacity, a person who understands the importance of design as a fulcrum to the good life. But beyond that, she's an advocate for designers who face all kinds of problems in the workspace. She champions designers at the state and federal level when it comes to legislation.
I think what I love about design and what I do in design is that I get to do a variety of things. I would be very bored if I did the same thing day in and day out. So although most of our work these days veers towards the more contemporary side, transitional, it's a rich, soft, modern look that reflects the times. There are notes sometimes of more tradition and sometimes more minimalism. It depends on the project and the individual client and their personality.
I think the world of design is opening up, and I think what's exciting is to see how creative solutions can solve a lot of problems. I think having my first happy client meant a lot to me, because I always say we're in the happy business here. I'm looking to make people happy. And so I think if I were to look back, that was very important to me.
I've been doing the same thing pretty much since I began, English country style, which I love. I love chintz. I'm known as the Prince of Chintz. I used to enjoy the creating, the putting colors together, fabrics together. Clients who didn't know in those days anything about what you were doing, but they listened to you and they watched and they saw the completion, whereas I don't ever think any room or house is completed. It's sort of like a garden that grows all through your life. But there's something about it that getting this client satisfaction and introducing them to things that they didn't know existed, and they introducing you to things that you didn't know existed. And it was that melting of their personality, yours, and senses, sensibilities, and it was fun. Over the years, I've had, through recommendation, like Mariah Carey, and I know that was funny because she'd seen a house I did in the country and liked it very much, and yet when I showed her things for her apartment in New York, she didn't like anything I showed her. So we must have seen about 150 different fabrics, florals mostly, because I thought that's what she'd want. Well, she didn't. She only has one room, 2 rooms, the kitchen that has flowers, and also in her bedroom.
Anytime I introduce my grandmother, I always say, this is my sister. We've always just been so simpatico that it's not really like a traditional grandmother-granddaughter relationship. It's much more like a sisterly relationship where we're just very interested in the same things and just complement each other really well. So we've palled around all my life, whether it be in New York City or when I was in college or traveling abroad. She always came to visit me wherever I was. When I was a little girl, every year on my birthday, my grandma would say, when you're 16,
we're going to Paris. And we did. And we stayed on the left bank. And we went to flea markets and amazing museums. We went to nightclubs and cafes. And then recently, for my 35th birthday, she brought me back to Paris. And we stayed in the same room, in the same hotel on the left bank. And she organized a birthday party for me. She brought me to Pierre Cardin, to all of the hot spots on the right bank that she loves so much, in the Faubourg Saint-Honoré. She thinks it's the most special city in the world.
You know, there have been countless times where she has more fun than most. For instance, when we went to Miami Basel, and my best friend Denise came to stay with us in the room. So we go to many art fairs, and at the end of the day, we're walking back, and she says, "Oh, wait, do you hear that music?" And I think like, oh goodness, Grandma, I'm tired, let's go home. And she's like, well, no, let's just go see what it's about. Let's just pop our heads in. And her energy level is what's the most incredible element about my grandmother. Always up for a good time. She was taking a trip in Venice when she met Arthur. And the way she explains it is something out of a movie, where it was a drizzly day and they had met, they'd kind of seen each other from afar. They were each wandering the city. And on this rainy day, they ran into each other and they spontaneously embraced. And they were together ever since.
Everything in life has possibilities. And the best possibility in my life was having met Arthur Steinberg in Italy. At 21, I knew what I wanted in a husband. Outgoing, an entrepreneur, and I found that in Franklin J. Linford. However, many years later, I was looking for someone entirely different. Quiet, poet, sweetheart. And I found that in Arthur Steinberg. On May 25th, 1998, Arthur and I were married at the Kink House in Tarrytown, New York. The founder of ISIS, of course, was Erling Thunberg. He founded it in 1962. He was from Sweden. He was the one who came up with this humanitarian ideas and the purpose of interdisciplinary learning, how we could all learn from other professions.
The Salon program was really designed to respond to, I think, one of the basic ideas upon which ISIS was founded, and that's the idea that no great social or world concern can be resolved effectively through the lens of a single discipline, and that it really requires a multidisciplinary approach to find rich resolutions to challenges. And so the Salon program brings together groups of people, both professionals and students, for critical exchanges of ideas.
The first event I came to was Black in China, and I tell you, I looked at the description of Black in China. I said, is this real? The topics have just been interesting, very interesting, and every time the topics seem to be more intriguing.
The salons, what we do is we have people come in and you're very gracious with offering food and hospitality and wine, and everyone mingles with one another. And of course, always take your perch at your small stool right in front of the speaker. And also, we have such an interesting group of people who attend the salon. And what I love is that they enjoy so much the salons that they end up bringing their friends. So we're always meeting new people.
What's so amazing about A Night at the Opera with Ruth is that she loves to go to get champagne in intermission. She loves to make an event of it. She dresses properly in a day and age where people now wear jeans to the opera, not realizing historically that it was a special night out. I see my grandmother often. I always have cultural play dates, but I visit her at home as well. And always stop by. I think I'm one of the only people that has the right to the casual stop by. And she's always happy to have me, serve me food, let me shop in her closet, and just hear stories, what I've been up to.
You know when you read those magazines and they ask people, who is your style icon? And they always say, you know, Jacqueline Onassis or Babe Paley or some historic figure. For me, my style icon was always my grandmother. And all my life, she's given me all my clothes, shoes, jewelry, you name it. I always went shopping in her closet. Instead of stores, it was like a, you know, like kind of a couturier odyssey in her closets. So all of this is up for grabs?
Well, yeah, I want to go through it and see what I don't want and what you want.
Ruth calls jeans dungarees. I think that's probably a generational thing. And she doesn't really like them. She wants me to wear my hair down, and she wants me to wear anything but dungarees. So one time she says, "Hey, Tori, can I try on those dungarees?" And I said, "Okay." She tries them on. She said, Can I have these? This has just taken 30 years off of my life." I was like, "Yeah, Grandma. After all the clothes you've given me, you can have my dungarees." Ruth is a lady, and I say that in a way that harkens back to, you know, what is the quintessential lady. Ruth is the quintessential lady because when she goes to bed every night, she puts on perfume just for herself. Doesn't matter if anybody's there, she puts it on just for herself. When Ruth wakes up in the morning, she says to herself in the mirror, "Ruth, I love you." And she has taught me that the most important thing is to have a job you love and to believe in yourself.
I get up, I guess, about 7 o'clock, go and pick up the New York Times outside my door, get back in bed, read the New York Times, even fall back to sleep.
She loves to dance. She loves, whether it's Argentinian tango, which she competed in professionally, or whether it's more traditional dance, like the Charleston or the box step, what have you. She absolutely loves to dance. I've been working the last few days with the crew here. They have asked me a lot of stories about your life, and I feel like I was able to speak to most of it, but I did sugarcoat one thing. And at the risk of sounding cliche, it's something that I think women think about a lot, which is the balance between family life and professional life. And I remember recently you confided in me and you said that you felt like you neglected your children to some extent because you were pursuing your career?
I did feel guilty when I had to leave away from the office, which was at home. And they were little, and they would cry as I went out the door. And our housekeeper, Janie, said, "Don't worry, they stop crying the minute you go out the door." But I do now, as I look back, feel that I was somewhat selfish in pursuing the career, perhaps at the cost of the time I should have given the children. We would spend dinners together, every dinner, around the round table over here. And you know I prefer round tables. Yes, yes. I have a history for that. And whenever I was offered a new position in an organization, I would go around the table at dinner time, asking their opinions, and everyone except Lance would say, "Yes, Mother, you take it." Lance always abstained. To this day, I don't know why or what he meant. I always forget to ask him why he abstained.
You know, Ruth was a role model to me in that she had a family, she had a career, and I think so often women think you can't have both.
I think Ruth's experience pushing a pencil and then being told that she wouldn't advance in the career that she wanted to work in, that she had a degree in, really prompted her to think bigger. And it also led her to live the life that I think a lot of women want to have. I think it's hard to find the balance in terms of career life and home life. And I think Ruth was able to do that. And I think that's something that is really admirable, that balance.
So I've had marriage, children, a career, and I'm almost 90. So well, I'm saying to you, all of you, particularly the women, you can have it all. It does take determination and a lot of energy. You can have it all. At heart, I'm still a little girl on Bamberger in St. Louis, Missouri, right near the Mississippi. Now, in my life, a little older, I'm very secure here, near to my treasured family. I enjoy life, dancing, going to the theater, the opera, listening to my favorite music, all the culture that New York City has to offer. Life is truly beautiful.